Hi, my name is Dave Bode, and in this video, we'll explore sound design in Premiere Pro. If you've ever finished a video and thought, something feels off, like the sound is flat, the music is clashing with the voiceover, or your sound effects just aren't hitting right, you're not alone. Good sound design can make or break a project, and it's often the missing piece that separates amateur from pro. In this course, I'll show you how to layer multiple sound effects, blend them seamlessly with music and voiceover, and use a bit of EQ and dynamics processing to create a polished, cinematic mix, all inside of Premiere Pro. Let's get into it. Welcome to this course on sound design in Premiere Pro. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a fully edited sequence with video, music, and voiceover already in place, and then bring it to life with sound design. Now you might be wondering why I'm starting with a pre-edited sequence. That's because I wanted this video to specifically focus on sound effects and the little tweaks you make to the mix, enhancing the atmosphere, adding impactful moments, and making everything perfectly fit in the mix. Now, if you're looking for a more in-depth or advanced guide on voiceover processing or music editing, be sure to check out my longer Sound Design in Reaper course, link in the description below. Now, I know Reaper is going to be quite a bit different than Premiere Pro, but most of the concepts as it relates to voiceover processing and music editing are going to be extremely useful. So if you want to know more, check that out. With that said, let's jump in and start crafting the perfect audio experience. So to start, let's take a look at what we're working with here.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. To go harder, faster, and overcome all obstacles. Hydrowater. Fuel your passion.
This video is brought to you by Envato, the unlimited creative asset subscription. Get studio quality motion graphics templates, check out the link in the description, and start creating now. So I got some great looking footage in there. I got a banging audio track. Both of those came from Envato. And I have a really sweet voiceover provided by Jonathan Oldham, which I found on Fiverr. He's a wonderful voiceover artist. If you're looking for someone with that Aussie sound, check this guy out. He's fabulous to work with. Now you can also see that I have my tracks locked, and if you look closely, you can see I have some volume keyframes on my music here. And essentially all that's doing is just ducking it out of the way of the voiceover a very little bit. It's not very drastic. It's just to ensure that the voiceover sits on top of everything else. Now, in terms of the overall level of the mix right now, I've intentionally mixed it just a hair quieter than I want my final output to be, because essentially I'm leaving room for the sound effects to be layered in as well. Speaking of loudness, I want to draw your attention over here to the audio track mixer. Now, if you don't have this up, you can come to Window and then down to Audio Track Mixer and then select your sequence and it'll come right up. And you'll probably have a different number of audio tracks than what you're seeing here. I've deleted all the empty audio tracks so that I can show you how to add them coming up in just a little bit here. But what I want to draw your attention to is these two plugins or effects that I have inserted on the mix track. The mix track is the last track in the processing chain, and the two effects that you need on your mix track for every single project is some kind of limiter. And a limiter's job is to make sure that the audio doesn't get too loud. And in this particular case, it is set to the True Peak preset, which is a great place to start. You don't really have to know the nuts and bolts of how these settings work. It's pretty conservative and it doesn't let peaks above -1 decibel pass through this effect. So that's the first one that you definitely need. And you can apply that by just clicking on one of these drop-down arrows, going to amplitude, compression, and hard limiter is right there. I'm going to get rid of that and show you this other effect, which is called the loudness meter. The loudness meter measures perceptual loudness. Now, you don't really need to know what that is, but you are going to need to know how to utilize this to make sure that your projects are of an appropriate loudness. Now, I'm going to just make an educated guess here and say that 99% of all of your projects are going to be for the web. And thankfully, there is a YouTube preset, which you can select right here. And what that does is it sets the quote unquote green zone for -14 LUFS. And that's where you want your overall loudness for your entire project, start to finish, to be. The other number that you want to keep an eye on is this true peak reading right here. And essentially, as long as this stays -1 or less, you're good to go. And with the hard limiter, that's going to help ensure that it's not going to get louder than -1. And if I reset this and play my project back, you're going to see what the loudness is.
You don't need to be pushed. Fuel your passion.
I'm coming in here at -18.3 LUFS. Now, like I said before, the ideal loudness is -14. Right now, we're coming in 3.7 decibels lower than that, which means I have some room to add some sound effects on top of that. And you can find the loudness meter under Special, and then it's right here, loudness meter. It's also important that you have these effects in this order. The effects get processed from top to bottom, and the last effect on your mix bus needs to be the loudness meter. Otherwise, it's not going to be accurately measuring the loudness of your project. Now, like I said before, all the video footage, the music, and the sound effects came from Envato. Now, in addition to having really fabulous stock video templates, graphic templates, 3D assets, including Blender models, which is just amazing, millions and millions of photos, and so much more, they also have fabulous sound effects in music. I'm going to click over to the music section here, and I just wanted to show you a couple of things. There's a new feature called Sounds Like, and this is a really great feature that will essentially use AI to analyze a song and then give you some options that sound like that song. It does exactly what it says that it does. So I wanted to show you this in action. I'm going to copy over this Alan Jackson song here, paste it, and then do a quick search. Now, this is a country song, I think from the 90s maybe, and let's see what it comes up with. Now, I think that's honestly pretty darn impressive. Now, another thing that I wanted to show you really quick is this channel or artist called PureHits. PureHits is a channel of content commissioned by Envato, the aim being more authentic sounding stock music. And it does sound really good. So you'll see there's a bunch of results here under PureHits, and these sound really great. Now, the main focus of this video is sound effects, and Envato has a lot. Literally hundreds of thousands of sound effects. I'm going to jump over here to my project panel, and I want to show you that I generally like to keep my projects pretty organized. You'll see that I have folders on folders on folders, or what Premiere calls bins. And I like to keep my files outside of Premiere organized like this as well, but it's a pretty good habit to get into. In fact, if you don't know this, in Premiere, you can create templates of folders and sequences and even have your audio track mixer pre-populated with effects and then save that out as a template. You can go right here and then just choose Save as a Template. And that makes starting a project a lot cleaner, so I don't have to constantly be setting up the same folders over and over again. So let's get some sound effects going in this project. But before I do, I'm going to need to get a few more audio tracks in this project because right now I only have 2 and both of them are locked. The reason that I lock these tracks when I go to do sound effects, or really when I'm finished editing any tracks, I prefer to lock them, is because when these are unlocked, it's not impossible to accidentally grab one and move it, which can be really frustrating if you don't realize you've done it. And then 5 minutes or 10 minutes later, you come back and you're like, oh no, something is horribly wrong and I need to go back and fix it. You can either undo 300 times or try to manually fix it. I don't like doing any of that, so I prefer to just lock all the tracks that I know are good to go. So my music edit is good, my voiceover placement is good, and my video edit is good. So I'm going to lock all of those tracks with this toggle right here. But I do need more tracks. So what I'm going to do is right click and then choose Add Tracks. It's going to bring up this window. I'm going to say 0 video tracks, and let's do something like 6 audio tracks. I'm going to leave the track type to standard and then click OK. And then in the audio track mixer, I like to rename these. You can rename them down here, but I find it more convenient to do up here. You don't have to name your audio tracks, but I think it's helpful, especially when you are dealing with a larger number of tracks, just to keep things organized. And the track names show up down here too, which is very handy. Let's start off by adding some sound effects to the first couple of shots here. Let's take a look at what we're going to need sounds for. And to make this a little bit clearer, I'm going to temporarily unlock these and then mute both of them because I really want to focus on just the sound effects, and then we'll come back to adjusting the levels later on. All right, so we have this wide shot here of this mountain and these 2 downhill skateboarders. I guess downhill is kind of redundant. I don't think people skateboard uphill, but anyway, that's a different story. And then we have this kind of medium shot where this person's doing a really sweet skid turn. And I picked out some great sound effects for this. So for the wide shot here, I have this forest, mixed, high trees, wind, distant. Man, these names are just great. It's kind of an ambient foresty sound, which I think will work pretty well. So I'm going to double click to bring it up in the source monitor and pick a section to use. So let's take a listen. Cool, that sounds great. I'm going to kind of arbitrarily mark an in and an out point with I and O on the keyboard, and then drag that into my project. It's not going to be the right length, but that's okay. I'm just going to trim it up here. Very good. I think that's a good place to start. Now I also have some skateboarding sounds here, and let's see what we have. That's great. And then we have a little bit of this. I want to clear the in and the out. So this is a long clip. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but you can hear there's a lot of skateboarding type sounds in here. So let's start with this one. I'm just going to drag it down right into my project here and maybe make a little bit more room. I can kind of collapse the music and the VO tracks to give me a little bit more room by holding Alt and then scrolling. You can see that right down here. If you want to know any of the keyboard shortcuts, you'll see them right down here. So let's just see what this sounds like. Hey, that's pretty good. I'm going to just trim this up here and delete the tail off of that. Also maybe trim up that ambience a little bit. So what I'm seeing here is we start skateboards kind of straight, and then right here, which I'll drop a marker with M, it goes into this kind of skid turn here. So I think maybe I can do a little volume adjustment here by control clicking like that to add a little keyframe and then just ramp up this sound just a little bit. I don't know if that's going to sell it all the way. So I also probably want to bring in some of this sound as well. Let me find a spot that I think will work. Ooh, because this is kind of the end of the clip. It sounds like someone is like stopping, which, is not exactly the right sound, but I think it'll work for this. Kind of punch up this moment here. So I'm just going to align that with my marker there. Cool. And I think maybe I'll just bring this down a little bit because I want to hear this a little bit more. In fact, I want to bring up the level of this a little bit. Now, to do level adjustments on clips, you can do them multiple different ways. There's probably at least 5 different ways that you can adjust the volume of your clips. So sometimes what you'll see me do is grab this clip volume control and move it up and down. You can go positive 15. Other times what I'll do is I'll select a clip and then press G, which brings up this audio gain dialog box. Sometimes I prefer to use this because it's just a personal preference, but I like this line here to remain at 0 decibels, like 95% of the time. If I have to increase the volume of a clip, I don't prefer to push this up because visually it's a little bit more difficult to see that that clip has indeed been pushed up in volume, where if I hit G on the keyboard, and let's say I just bring this up like 5 decibels, the waves get drawn bigger. And for me, I just like that visual a little bit more. So I'll show you that one more time. I'll bump it up 4 more decibels, which is probably too much. But this just helps me see that now these 2 clips are relatively the same in their overall volume because the waves are much more similar than they were a minute ago. Cool. I like that. It's coming across. I don't know. It's a little bit loud, but I think we can maybe pull this down. And then right when this skid starts, I may do a little bit of kind of volume manipulation or just use the fade in. So if I zoom in here, just kind of fade this in. And the new fade functions work really, really well because you can grab the kind of crossfade here. And then if you pull it up and down, you can change the shape, which is awesome. It saves creating keyframes. Now, before I go any further, I want to switch over my time units from frames, which they currently are set to, the time ruler numbers, which is set to frames. And I want to change that to show audio time units, which gives me a lot more granularity in how far I can zoom in. And it's a little bit easier to finesse things like, well, audio. So I think possibly I'm going to go back on what I said. And I'm just going to do this with volume keyframe. So add a little crossfade there. I think that gets us in the neighborhood. I do kind of like that. I'm going to leave it for now and see how that works with everything else. Maybe I'll come back to it later and make some further adjustments. Now, the ambience in the beginning, I'm sure that this is way too quiet. So I'm going to press G on the keyboard and just bump this up like 12 decibels. That's better. And then when we cut to the close here, I can either split this and adjust these separately, or I can set some keyframes. By the way, you're going to see me do keyframes very quickly. It's become a habit of mine in Premiere. When I'm doing keyframes, I almost always add 2. And the reason is that generally I want to do something like at this point, bring the volume down. And so to do that, I need 2 keyframes. I need one to represent where the volume was and another one to represent where the volume is going to. So just about all the time when I'm doing keyframes, I will hold control and just go click, click really quickly. And then I can just bring this down like that. Now, I think I just want to make, I know I'm going to fuss with this quite a lot, but I'm just going to make a small adjustment here. Cool. That's great. There's one more sound that I think may punch this up a little bit more, and that is wind. I found this sound effect called, Wind blowing 2 ears noise loop, which another great name. It's kind of exactly what you think it is. It's kind of that sound like wind blowing in your ears, but in this case, it's actually blowing in a microphone. But it has that effect that I think will work really well. And that's kind of, we're moving quickly here following this skater person. So I'm just going to drop this down here and see if we can detect this at all. Now it looks like, looking from the waveform, you can see that these are bunched really close and these are not. This has got a lot of low frequency content in it. So we got to just keep an eye on that because too much low frequency content can really make things muddy and terrible, especially if you are mixing on headphones, because headphones are great, but they do not represent subsonic frequencies very well, which is why I almost always advocate mixing on speakers with a very good subwoofer if you're doing anything with low frequency content. Cool. So that actually just works kind of right out of the box there. Now, the one thing that I do want to do is I want to high pass this to just make sure that it doesn't have too many low frequencies. And to do that, I'm going to jump over to effects and I'm going to grab a third-party audio effect called Nova. And I'm going to apply that to this clip. This is a free EQ, and you'll see it right over here in my effects controls. If I click edit, this is an amazing EQ, and you may be wondering, okay, well, Premiere comes with a parametric equalizer, which looks like this. Do I need a different EQ? No, you don't. but you should get one because this stock EQ kind of sucks. Well, it's actually not that bad, but this EQ is a lot better. And I've been recommending this EQ for many years, and it's still on like every single list of best free EQs because it is super powerful, very easy to use, and it's free. So to get this effect, you can head on over to tokyodawn.net or just do a search for TDR Nova. You can pick it up right here. It's available for Mac and Windows, which is awesome. It does great equalization. It does parallel dynamic processing, and it's got a great user interface. I'm going to jump into it in just a second, but another effect that I want to show you is this one right here. And don't let this very stripped down 1998 looking website throw you. This is an audio compressor effect, and it's free, and it is one of the best compressors that I've found for very, very clean or ultra clean peak compression that never sounds, as it says right here, clicky. Sometimes when you set a compressor with a very fast attack time, it can sound clicky, which is not at all a good thing. But this compressor doesn't. It's a great compressor. I use it personally all the time. I actually use the premium version, but this free version is absolutely fabulous. So I would definitely recommend getting this compressor and Nova for your compression and EQ needs inside of Premiere. They don't have any effects inside of Premiere that match these two. So definitely check these out. Now, download them, install them, and then jump over here to your audio track mixer, click on the flyout, come down to Audio Plugin Manager, point Premiere to wherever it is you have installed them, point Premiere there, scan the plugins, and then enable or disable the ones you want to use, click OK. Bob's your uncle, and you'll be able to add them right over here in the audio track mixer, as well as in the effects here. All your third-party audio effects will show up here as well. So all that to show you a very simple thing that we're going to do with this particular sound effect, and that is apply a high pass. Now, if I enable this FFT analyzer here on the input, and we solo up just sound effect track 4, what you'll see is there's a good amount of low frequency information below like 50 hertz, and maybe we want to just get rid of that. It's my preference just to roll those frequencies out using a high pass filter. So we can set this to something like 42 hertz. Still works, sounds great, leaves room for bass in the music track, and we're good to go. Cool. The only thing I might want to do is press Y on the keyboard and bring up the slip edit tool and slip this just a little bit to the right so that when we have this little moment here where we're going into the slide, we also don't have this kind of bubbly sounding wind noise. It's like too much happening all at once. I think just spacing out those little audio cues there works a little bit better. All right, let's jump on to the next couple of shots here. We have tennis, 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 and more tennis. So pretty obvious what we need here. Or, well, maybe it's not. It's obvious to me. What I'm looking for is some tennis ball hits, and I found some really nice sounding ones. Here we have a serve. Here we have a tennis ball hit and another tennis ball hit. And I think actually this came in a pack of like 4 or 5. And I only have a couple loaded in for some reason. But let me jump back and I'll re-import the rest really quick. Here are the other ones. This actually came as a pack of 5, but for some reason I didn't have all of them in there. But they all sound pretty similar. They're great. I'm just going to select them and then bring them in. And actually, to make this easier, what I want to do is just scrub in the timeline here and then drop some markers where I want the transient or the spiky bit to be, because that'll make lining these up a lot easier. So right there. Cool. And now I'm going to come in and just align these so that the spiky part of the wave, which is what sometimes is referred to as the transient, which means just kind of a very short thing, but generally in audio, it means a short, loud thing. And we'll just kind of line those up, where they should be. We'll grab this one. Go to right here and line this up. Now, if snapping ever becomes a problem, you can turn snapping off by pressing the S key or just hitting this button over here. Sometimes when you're moving sound effects around and you have a lot of clips in your project, it starts snapping to everything and it makes things really annoying. So you can turn it off temporarily if you want, or permanently. It's up to you. So we'll get that lined up there. Boom, nailed it. And let's grab this one. Yes. And we'll come to this marker here and line that up. Perfect. All of those are very, very peaky. I'm just looking at the meter here. They're almost hitting 0, so I don't think I have to do anything in terms of their loudness. So I'm going to leave them there for now. I also grabbed some really nice female attack, grunt, fight sounds. This came in another pack. I think I'm missing one of them in this project. Let's see here. Yeah, number 3. And that could be a good one. You never know. So let's see. Great. I'm just going to grab kind of the back half of some of these and just layer them right with these hits. So let's see what we have here. Love it. What do we have here? There you go. So there's just a piece of one. I think I already had the in and the out point sent from kind of previously working on this project. Love it. And let's grab another one here. That works. This one's actually clipped a little bit, but that's okay. It does look like it's clipped, but that's okay. I'll just knock it down by 3 decibels and that'll be fine. Maybe a little bit more. Boop, like that. Cool. Volumes are a little bit high, but we can solve that with a little compression, and that's okay. One thing that I think they need is a little bit of reverb. Now, applying reverb in Premiere is sometimes a little bit tricky because you would think, oh, if I want reverb on this clip right here, I can just go over to my effects, grab some kind of reverb here, like studio reverb, and just put that on one of the clips. But listen to what happens. Well, actually, you can't hear that because whatever preset loaded by default sounds like nothing. But let me make this extremely obvious. Now, the eagle-eared listeners of you will notice, I'll make this more obvious by moving these down. The reverb cuts right when the clip stops, and that is not desirable. We do not want that because it sounds bad. Now, if this were a longer audio clip, we could get away with doing it this way, but it's not, so I'm not going to. One way around this is you can add some tracks and then put reverb on those tracks and then only add the sound effects that you want to have reverb to those tracks. That's a workaround. Another workaround is adding a sub mix. And in fact, I'm going to show you how to add 2 submixes. So I'm going to add an audio submix and then another audio submix. Because one thing that I think is going to be very helpful if you're doing kind of more intense or robust sound design in Premiere is to mix all of the sound effects together so that you can globally adjust their level or volume. Right now, all of these tracks are going to the mix bus, but with a submix track, what we can do is we can first send them to the submix track, and then we can use that to adjust the volume of all of these tracks at once, which can be useful down the line. You don't have to do it, but it can be helpful. This other submix, I'm going to name reverb. So with these tracks here, I'm going to set the routing, which is what I'm doing right here, to the submix. So now if I play this back, you'll see that it's going to show up here. And then from here, the audio gets routed to the mix track. I just realized I named that SFX bub, which makes no sense. So now if I wanted to add an effect here, like a compressor to kind of limit all of the peaks of my sound effects, I can do that. And in fact, I will do that. I'm going to add a VST3 effect right here under Effect, John V Prod. And I'll just set the attack time to 0 and pull the threshold down to -3.3. That's pretty much it. Oh, and I want to click this button here and change it from 0 latency to FIR LA, which stands for look ahead. This is going to make it sound just a little bit cleaner. Oh, and I just realized I put that on the reverb and not the SFX sub. So super easy to fix that. I'm just going to drag this over to the left and let's see if it's doing anything now. Yeah, very good. It's knocking down some peaks, a couple of decibels. It's doing a great job. So what about reverb? Yeah, let's get back to that. So right here on the reverb sub mix track, I'm going to add, this time I'm going to use a Premiere effect because I'm just trying to keep it simple here, and this reverb definitely works. I'm going to add the studio reverb, and I'm going to set it up really quickly, but you can kind of copy these settings if you want. High frequency, low frequency, dry down, wet all the way up. Now, the one thing that you definitely want to pay attention to when you're using reverb on kind of a submix or as a send, you want to have the dry all the way down and you want to have the wet all the way up. And that ensures that this will be 100% reverb all the time. Now, if that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. It will in just a second. Now I need to find the two tracks that I want to have reverb. That's going to be audio track 1. And then right here, I'm going to create a send from this track to the reverb track. You can see if I hover over this little drop down here, it says send assignment selection. So I click this and I added verb. And then I get this little dial here and I can send a certain level of the audio to the reverb submix. And check this out. Now we have reverb. Now it doesn't sound exactly right. I think maybe I'll pull down the high frequency cut a little bit more. Oh, and turn the width all the way up. That's what I wanted to do. Cool, maybe early reflections down. Dampening up, diffusion up. Yeah, it's good enough. I think maybe I'll just bring the level down just a little bit more. And then I'm going to do the same thing with audio track 2 here, or the sound effects track 2. I'm going to add a little bit of reverb to this track as well. Maybe a little bit less. And I'll just pull it down there. Now, I'm sure it has occurred to you that adding reverb to these tracks is going to add them for all of the sound effects that we put on these tracks, and it will. But I'm going to show you how to fix that. If you click this little button here, we can change the keyframes from clip keyframes to track send verb volume. So when you click that, you're no longer able to adjust these clips, but it's just going to be temporary. What I want to do is put 2 keyframes right here and 2 keyframes right here. And I want to kind of have this ramp up in volume. So before these hits, the volume is at negative infinity. So it's not sending any audio to the reverb track, but right when we get to these 3 sound effects, the audio ramps up, or the send volume ramps up. And now we have reverb. So I can do the same with this one. I'm going to change the keyframes to track send verb volume. And then I'm going to do something similar with the keyframes here on track 2. And now if I go back to the right here, these will not have any reverb, as you can see right here in the meter. Now, once I've done that, once I've added those keyframes to the verb volume, I like to go back to clip keyframes because it drives me nuts to be in any other mode. And that's just kind of a personal preference there. All right, let's continue on to the next couple of shots here. And the next clip here that I need to add some sound effects for is this snowboarder. And you can see what he's doing here, he or she. We're ramping off this giant, well, I don't know if it's a giant ramp, but this person gets some serious air and is doing a pretty awesome trick here. So what I'm thinking is we get some kind of snowboardy sounds right here, and then when they launch, we get some kind of ambient, maybe a whooshy sound or something. I found some great sound effects to make that happen. So let's check out the snow sounds. So I have this, which is great. It's pretty much great as is. So I'm going to drop that in here. And the reason that I have so many sound effects tracks is sometimes I like to have the sound start a little bit before a previous sound effect. Now, you can kind of trim these up, but sometimes it's convenient just to have multiple tracks to put sound effects on. You don't have to use them all, but it's a little bit easier than adding one every time you need a new one. So let's get this sound in here. Let's see what we have. Cool. And then I have this other snowboard sound effect here, and I've previously selected this section, which is like the perfect sound, I think, for a little jump. So I'm going to try and align this with that jump. So I'm going to pull this down to another track and then make a little bit more room here, like that. So let's take a look at this clip here. I want to align kind of the loudest part with this edit point right here. Yeah, that's great. Pretty good, kind of just like that. If you wanted to punch it up more, you could increase the volume here. So we could throw a keyframe in, or maybe just bump this up like 3 decibels. Throw a keyframe here and then just bring it down. And then I think this could use a little bit of sizzly magic, and I have a whoosh sound that I'm going to drop in here, which I think should sound pretty cool. So this is not going to be like an accurate representation, but it's going to, I think, punch up the feeling of this moment. So let me get in this whoosh right here. I don't know, that was weird. I don't know why it came in like that. Well, I don't know why it's doing that, but we'll just trim up the beginning. That was weird. And then I want to align this to this edit point right here. Let's see how that works. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Is that as good as this one? You know what? I'm going to trade it out. So I'm going to Alt, click and drag and just replace that. And then without adjusting the start and end points, I'm going to slip edit this with the slip edit tool. You'll see me changing tools pretty fast here, and then just do a little volume adjustment with the crossfade, and I may just kind of cross this over that next edit. Let's see what we have. I don't know. I think that's pretty good. If anything, it's a little bit loud, so I'll probably drop this down a couple decibels. Now, if you're making volume adjustments like this, and you find that it's doing way too much and you don't have granular control, once you click on the volume line or adjustment, if you hold the control key down, you can make much finer adjustments. So maybe just bring this down like 3 decibels. I think that works. We'll see how it sits in the mix. My feeling right now is it's a little bit too sizzly, like too much high-end frequency stuff, but we'll leave it and see what happens. Let's go on to the next bit here. So we have these cars that are drifting. Pretty short shot. That's some pretty intense engine stuff right there. So I'm going to bring that down into my project. And that's a little bit longer than I think what I need. So I'm going to just split that by hitting Control K. And then I'm roughly kind of lining it up with this edit right here, if you can't see that. In fact, I'll just make this a different color by changing the label color to like rose so you can see that. In fact, that's a good idea for like a bunch of these clips. Just change the label color to rose, and that way it'll make the edit points a little bit easier to see. So you can see where I'm generally kind of lining this up like this. Cool. So I'm going to show you a little trick here. I have 2 of the same engine sounds, but it's long enough where I can kind of edit it and play them at the same time, which sounds like hot nonsense right now. But I'm going to show you a little trick here. I'm going to hop over to the effects controls right over here. I'm going to adjust the pan for these clips. So on this lower one here, I'm going to pan that to the right by putting this at 100%. And on this upper one here, I'm going to pan that to the left by setting that to -100. That's not intuitive, but that's what I did. And now it has kind of a much wider stereo image. And it's probably a little bit extreme. So maybe instead of 100, I'll just do 50s, which won't be such a, what's called a hard pan. but definitely has a lot of space to it. Let's hear this other clip that I got. It's some kind of Ferrari, I think a Testarossa, but it sounds pretty epic. We get like some wind noise in there. This is a fabulous sound right here. So I'm going to drop this down here. But let's just see how it sounds with these other two clips. I don't know, I think that sounds pretty good. And then maybe I'll just crossfade this out too right here. So, yeah, that sounds pretty awesome. You can add a little bit of ambience here if I make this shape just right. Cool, I like that. The other thing that I need is some tire squeal noises. And I have a couple of pretty good candidates. That's great. So I'm going to drag that down. I need a place to put this. I think I'm going to take this clip, just bring it up. I'm just kind of doing some housekeeping on these clips. And then I'm going to grab all three of these, press Alt and the up arrow to just move them up so I can add these tire squeals to audio track 7 and 8 or sound effect 5 and 6. Also, in the same way that I colored those video clips with different labels, if you want to do the same for your audio clips, you definitely can to help you kind of just keep track of things. One thing that I think is very helpful is to just color them something different, which just makes them easier to visually identify. Cool, that works out great. And then I have this other clip. Man, I love that clip. It's got a really great stereo image, which I think is pretty awesome. Now, adding all four of these together, our overall volume is getting pretty toasty. So let's just keep an eye on that. What I'm going to do is make an adjustment here. I'm going to bring down these engine noises. I'm just going to press G and knock them both down like 5 decibels. Which kind of helped. And I think this is a little bit loud, so maybe 4 decibels on that one. Let's try that. It's still heckin' loud, so overall, it's gonna knock all of them down another 3 decibels. Like I mentioned earlier, I could individually adjust these, but sometimes it's easier just to make a selection, press G, and then you can just adjust the gain by a set amount. That's faster for me, so that's what I do. All right, there's only a couple more sections to go, so I tell you what, we're just gonna blast this out really quick. I'm gonna show you how to add some awesome running noises here. The best way to do this, I've found, is to turn off audio time units and then use markers for these footsteps. So every time the foot hits the floor, or the ground as you might say, I'm just gonna drop a marker. Now I'm gonna jump over to my foot sounds. Where is this? Running, here we go. All right. I'm just gonna take a section here, I, O, at random, and just bring it down, because this is gonna need a little bit of editing to get these footsteps in the right spot. I'm gonna switch back over to show audio time units. And what I'm looking for is I want the hits here. By the way, this sounds like this. So I want all of these hits to line up with those markers. Right now they're close, but they need a little bit of adjusting. So I'm going to get close to this next one, press Control K, and then I'll hover right over that marker. Then I can press Y on the keyboard and I can just do a slip edit here. So again, I'm going to split the clip using Control K, and for some reason, sometimes Adobe does not split the clip where the cursor is. I don't really know why, but that's just the way it is. And then I'll just do a slip edit to get that right on the marker. I'm just going to go a little bit in front of this one, Control K, and then hover over the marker so I can see exactly where I need this to line up. Perfect. That's great. Next, we have Kayaker. What's Kayaker doing? Just busting through a giant wave. Cool. I have some water here. I have river. Perfect. So let's add some river. So I'll pull that down here. We'll add some river. Very good. Definitely going to be too loud, but that's okay. Just pull that down like 9 decibels. Cool. Maybe bring it up a little bit. I have white water. That sounds pretty cool. Grab this section, we'll bring it out. I'll drop it down here, kind of trim it up a little bit. And then I have this water splashes thing, which sounds pretty epic. So I'm just going to use that whole thing there and just trim up the end. And I want that pretty much at the beginning, so I may have to start this a little bit before. Maybe like that. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that works pretty well. That wasn't too complicated, was it? I don't think so. And I think it sounds right. All right, next we have bike person, and then it's our final shot. So we're just going to blast through here. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. I'm going to show you the whole thing. I wasn't going to show you the whole thing, but now I'm going to show you the whole thing. So I picked out some cycling sounds. That works pretty well. It's just kind of like cycling, I don't know, with some knobbly tires or something. So we could pretty much pick any section at random here and then just bring that in. We don't need to get too fussy about it. I will color these. I'm going to change the label real quick to green, which apparently is a different green. That's okay though. Let's see what we got. Good, that's a good start. Then I have mountain audio off-road biking. So I already selected a section there. I think that works pretty good. And then mountain bike constant. Let's see what we have here. Cool. Yeah, I think that works too. I'll just throw this up here. Generally, I like to have my sounds together. I know it's a little bit obsessive compulsive. There's no real reason that they need to like sit next to each other. I just kind of like it visually. So let's see. I think this is a mono clip too, but that's okay. Let's see what this sounds like all together. I wish I had some rumbly stuff. Like wind, tires, tennis, snow, skateboarding, glitch, engine, dirt, gravel. I knew it. Okay, that's not very rumbly, but let's isolate these. I think if any of those, I'm not in love with that one, so I'm just going to get rid of it and replace it with this one. I made all these so tiny, I can't see them, so let's make these a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. So let's listen to this one. I'm just going to solo this. Okay, what I'm thinking is it's possible I can add an EQ to this. Oh, you know what? I never even explained the best part of this EQ. It's an equal loudness EQ, which means when you adjust the frequencies here, it compensates the output to make the overall loudness perceptually the same. You know, EQ is essentially adjusting frequency and amplitude or volume, if you will. You're just not adjusting it altogether. You're only adjusting part of it, either boosting or cutting. Anyway, what I want to do with this clip is I want to boost the heck out of the low frequencies and see if I can get a little bit more rumble out of it. So let's see if that works. Yeah, not really. That's interesting. So I'm going to change tactics here on the fly. I can't remember what I did for this last time, but here's the thing. I know that I have this wind sound, and I only used part of it. I could use the same part again, but I think I'm just going to grab a little piece right here and Alt replace that. And then I do want to make sure that I don't boost the low frequencies on this because that could get bananas. So let's hear what this sounds like. Cool. That's great. In fact, I will leave it boosted just a little bit to mix with the other stuff. Maybe like that, but I do want to high pass it as well. Cool, that works. Let's see how that sounds with the other two. I think if anything, it could just come down maybe a couple decibels so we're not overwhelmed. All right, we're finally to the outro here of the video where we have these pretty sick looking graphics. What are we going to do? Well, I got some glitch sounds because we have a whole bunch of glitchy stuff happening here. And these are always fun. These came in a pack with a whole bunch of glitch sounds, and I just have two here that I think will work. This, which is great. And the cool thing about these glitch sounds is that you can kind of mix and match bits and pieces of them. Like nothing really has to make a whole lot of sense. You can just kind of grab any part of it and stick it anywhere and it sounds glitchy, which is great. Sometimes there's something that you do want to kind of punch up. Like I think the lights come on, yeah, like right here. So I might find something that kind of syncs up with that. But for now, I'm just gonna kind of layer these in. I think that works pretty well. And then what's this? Yeah, this is a sweet sound. So I think I can actually use a couple of parts of this. I'm going to use this right here. And then I think when the light flash hits, and I'll drop a marker so I remember where that is. Drop a marker in the timeline. There we go. Then I'm going to grab this and have that kind of punch this moment up right here. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I was looking for. Let me just crossfade those out. Nice. So after listening to all the sound effects laid in there, I think I might be able to punch up the end just a little bit more with another one of those whoosh sounds. I only used one of them. So I think maybe I can add this one to the end too, and that might sound cool. I don't know why that one keeps being weird like that. And I'm almost certain this is going to be too loud, so I'm just going to preemptively turn it down. I love that. Cool. Now I'm done adding sound effects. No more sound effects. This is sounding great. The other thing that I noticed on playback is that I think I can fade in these engine noises a little bit. So I'm just going to fade those in like this. Because it felt a little bit dead, and I think this will help that transition if they start a little bit sooner. All right, that's good. Let's hear how this sounds with the voiceover and the music. So I'll unlock my tracks, I'll unmute those, and then I'll relock them so I don't inadvertently move something. And let's hear how everything sounds.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. To go higher, faster, and overcome all obstacles. Hydrowater. Fuel your passion.
Okay, well, that's going to be a little bit heavy on those sound effects. So let's kind of take this section by section here.
You don't need to be pushed.
So we can deal with this in a couple of different ways. One, we can just bring down the level of the sound effects here on the bus. So this is the sound effects mix bus right here. So what I can do is grab this, hold control, and then just bring it down like 3 decibels.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. To go higher.
The voiceover is getting obscured a little bit. So we might be able to knock down some of those peaks by coming back here to the compressor and just bringing down the threshold a little bit. Now this is going to kind of decrease the overall impact of some of those sounds, but it might be the right thing to do. We'll start here and then kind of reevaluate.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do.
So these sounds right here are just too loud. So I'm going to select both of these and then just turn them down by, let's try -3.
You don't need.
I think this one in particular is still too loud. So I'm going to knock it down another 3.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. To go higher.
Some of these sound effects can be loud. It's just when they overlap with the voiceover, it becomes very problematic. Like these sound effects are loud.
Pushing is what you do.
But they don't really obscure, with maybe the exception of this last one, they don't obscure the voiceover too much. So maybe I'll bring that last one down a little bit.
Pushing is what you do.
Actually, I'm bringing this down and put that back.
Is what you do.
Went too far. Subtle adjustments.
Is what you do.
This sound effect sounds gnarly.
To go.
But these engine noises, too loud. Like everything here is just too loud. So I'm going to grab all of them and bring them down like -4. Let's see what that does.
To go harder.
So right when that voiceover hits, I'm going to drop a couple of keyframes here and then bring them back up, like right here. So just drop them down, maybe like 5 decibels.
To go harder.
Maybe 12 decibels.
To go harder.
And probably want to feather these out a little bit more.
To go harder. To go harder.
So I'm going to continue making some keyframe adjustments to the volume of my sound effects submix. And now let's check out what the mix sounds like now that I've ducked the sound effects out of the way of the voiceover just a little bit.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. To go harder, faster, and overcome all obstacles. Hydrowater. Fuel your passion.
All right, it's in a pretty good spot. It's tough for me to judge exactly because I'm on headphones, which I don't really prefer, but let's check out the overall loudness.
Pushing is what you do. Hydrowater. Fuel your passion.
So it looks like I have a little bit of room here to bring up the overall level. The sound effects still feel a little bit too hot, and that's okay. But if I want more from the voice and the music, I can just globally bring these up by selecting all of them and then bringing them up by like 2 decibels.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. Fuel your passion.
So that's pretty good. I think I'm gonna select just the voiceover and bring that up maybe just 1 more decibel.
You don't need to be pushed.
Another technique that can work to get a little bit more clarity from the voiceover is to cut out some frequencies in other tracks that are competing with the speech intelligibility frequencies of the voiceover. So what I might do here is put an EQ on the music and just carve out some of those high frequencies just a little bit. You hear that right in there? I'm just kind of boosting that up there. So if I just bring that down a little bit. It's going to sound a little bit dull, but I think in the mix, it'll work.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. To go harder, faster, and overcome all obstacles. Hydrowater. Fuel your passion.
If you feel like the balance overall is good between all of your tracks, but your volume is still a little bit low.
You don't need to be. Fuel your passion.
For example, if you wanted to make this 1 decibel louder, you could. A very simple way to do that is to use an effect before the hard limiter. And I'm going to use a compressor, the Fur Comp compressor that you've seen me use throughout this video. And I'm going to set it up with the threshold down just a little bit at like -3, and I'll increase the makeup gain to 1 decibel to give us a little bit of boost. So it's going to knock down the peaks just a little bit, and it's going to increase the output by about 1 decibel.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. To go harder, faster, and overcome all obstacles. Hydrowater. Fuel your passion.
Cool. Now the one thing that I was hearing, I don't want to fiddle with this too much, but this bike sound, I'm really not getting a whole bunch from this. So I'm just going to solo this. I don't know if it's that one or this. Yeah. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this track really quick and I'm going to add a Fur Comp effect and I'm going to compress the crap out of it. So I'm going to bring the threshold way down. Like that. And then I'm going to turn the makeup way up. because I'm not really hearing what I need to hear. And so all these spiky bits, I'm just going to iron all of those out and then bring everything else back up. In fact, -20 is probably too aggressive.
All obstacles. All obstacles.
Cool. That's good. I think it could probably also use a little bit of low energy stuff as well. And probably bring back a little bit of the overall volume right there.
All obstacles.
There we go.
Become all obstacles.
All right, things are sounding great.
You don't need to be pushed. Pushing is what you do. To go harder, faster, and overcome all obstacles. Hydrowater. Fuel your passion.
And that's a wrap. In this course, you learned how to layer sound effects to create depth and impact, balance everything against voiceover and music, and use markers to get precise visuals to align perfectly with the sound effects. We also looked at some light equalization and dynamics processing using a couple of powerful, free third-party plugins like TDR Nova and FurComp, and set up a submix to handle sound effects and reverb send. Finally, you saw how to fine-tune your mix with keyframe automation for precise volume control. You know, sound design can take your video from good to great, and now you've got the tools to make it happen right inside of Premiere Pro. But don't let the journey stop there. If you want to dive deeper into sound design, voiceover processing, music editing, and advanced audio processing like sidechain ducking and more, check out my other course on sound design in Reaper and the other great content right here on the Envato YouTube channel. If you like this video, please leave a comment below, hit like, and subscribe to get the latest content. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dave Bode, and I'll see you in the next one.